I hope you're doing great. So the topic for today's TechX session is Lando setup with Drupal. So most of you are familiar with Lando. Some of you are using it. Some of you know more about Lando. So this session is for everyone to get an understanding of what Lando is and how you can use it in your day-to-day work. Okay. So before we start more about Lando, what are the takeaways at the end of this session? So the takeaway at the end of this session is you can configure your own Lando file. You can set up your own environment using Lando, and you can add services as you like or need in your Drupal instance. So you will get an understanding of all these things at the end of the session. And as Deepa has mentioned, like this is going to be a little lengthy session than usual. So I want you to all to keep at it. This is not something very difficult to understand, but it's more of the concepts that you're going to use here. Okay, so let's start. So what are we going to cover in this session? So we will see about Lando architecture and overview, the different Lando recipes Lando provides and Drupal, configuring Lando recipes, and adding tooling for Lando applications. So these are some different concepts that Lando provides, and we'll see how it all works and how does it help us. So let's start with the very basic of what is Lando. So by the book, Lando is a development tool that is more focused on the application. When you say more focused on the application, what does it mean? So it means you don't have to create and tell about every service you need and every configuration of that service. You just name it and the Lando will get it ready for you. It's like a menu card, right? So you see the menu card, you choose the dishes that you want, you place an order without knowing how it's cooked or how much, what's the amount of salt and pepper in it, right? It's kind of an abstraction layer. That is, so you are more focused on your application instead of worrying about the different things that goes inside for the setup. Okay, so Lando is a local setup development tool that we use for our local Drupal setup and instances. Going forward now, what is Lando? What is the architecture of Lando? So at the very base, there is Docker. So you all who are using Lando, they must have seen Docker desktop, okay? And the Docker application they need to install before they install Lando. So for Lando to work, you need to first set up and install the Docker, and then upon it, you have to install the Lando. So Docker is at the very base. So first we have Docker as the first layer, and Docker has containers. You see different containers as database container, server Apache container, MySQL containers, right? Different containers. And then upon that, we have Docker Compose. Now, since when Docker was introduced, when you want to use Docker directly and you want to create a Drupal local setup with you directly using Docker and not Lando, then in that case, you need to create a Docker compose.yaml file. And in that file, you have to specify, for example, let's say you want to set up a Drupal application. So you have to specify each of the images that you want. So which image do you want for your Nginx or Apache server? Which image you want for MySQL? And you need to get that image from the Docker site, right? So you have to do the very minute details of each and everything that you need. You have to provide exact configuration that you need in the Docker Compose file. So what Lando does is Lando came and provided an abstraction layer, a layer around all these things. In Lando, you just have to say, okay, I want to create a Drupal 9 application. So you will provide the recipe. Okay, I will provide the recipe as Drupal 9. And Lando will take care of what all things you need to run a Drupal 9 application. So which you need a web server, then you need a database server, right? You need Composer. So Lando knows about all those things. So you just have to tell Lando, okay, I am working on Drupal application. So my recipe is Drupal. Yeah. So this is about the architecture of Lando. Then moving forward, so what all languages or the code languages Lando supports? So when you say code languages, it's .NET, Node, PHP, Python, Ruby, and Go. So these are the code languages that Lando supports. Lando is an open source application. So whatever it supports is by default open source language. Now we have seen different kind of services in a Drupal application, right? So Lando provides us a configurable and swappable services. So for example, on the server, you need to choose, you need Apache or Nginx. Then let's say on the database, you need to choose between, you need MySQL, you need MariaDB, you need Postgres, or maybe for the search API, you need Elasticsearch or Solr search, right? So as per the requirement of your project, as per different implementation, you need different services. So these are services from which you can choose. If you have Redis, Varnish, Memcached, you can choose from what all things you want in your local setup to make it similar to your production or development environment. So these are pre-configured service. You just have to say, okay, I need Apache, or I need MySQL, I need Solr, and it will get it ready for you. Now, what is lando.yml or YAML file? So how do you know if your project is Lando compatible or is Lando ready? So when you go to the root of the project, you will see a file called .lando.yml. If this file exists in your project, and if this file has something called name, recipe, and configuration, that means you have a Lando setup present in your repository or your code base, right? Now, when you see YAML file, YAML, so in Drupal, we at many places you will see .yml extension. So YAML is a specification that you use. So you have seen in services.yml, libraries.yml. So .lando.yml is on a similar grounds. It's follow the same coding standards of YAML file. So you need two spaces. When you're moving to the next line or something is inside a tree structure, it follows the same naming conventions as well. Okay. So this file should present for you to have a Lando setup. Now, where this file will come from if you're starting on a new project, and how can you create it? So this brings us to our first demo. So let's move on to the first demo. So here I have a Drupal 9.4.8 files and core. As you can see, right, there is no .lando.yml file here. So what I will do is I will do Lando init. Init says initialize Lando in my project. So when I do this, it will ask me, okay, where is your code base? Is it in Git, is it in Acquia, or is it the current working directory? So for me, it's the current working directory. Then it will ask for the recipe. So now I want Drupal 9 as the recipe. So I will choose Drupal 9. And it will ask me where is the web root. So my current directory is the web root of my application. And then at the end, I have to give a name to this application. So I'm giving us the Lando setup. So at the end, it has created a .lando.yml file after this is done. So you will see your app has been initialized. So now you have .lando.yml file in your project root. So as you can see here, now I have this file. To see the content of this file, we'll have a very simple file which has name, recipe, and web root. These are all the configuration that I have selected previously. And this is the minimum configuration it needs to start. So I will do a Lando start. So this will initiate the Drupal 9 recipe and will get me all the required containers and services I need to run a Drupal application. So you will see it's also installing Composer with a version of 2.0.7 as the default. And then it's initiating the app server, the database server. Okay. So at the end, you will see some app server URLs, right? So you see Lando setup.lando.site and the localhost URLs, and services as app server and database server. So when I do a Lando info, it will give me information about all the running services. So we have app server, then we have type is Apache, then we have PHP configuration of 7.4. Then we have a MySQL database server, and we can see the host name, the database password, username, credentials here, and the version that I'm running. So I'm running a version of 5.7 for my MySQL. So this gives me information about all the things that I have running. There's another helpful command. If you just type Lando, it will give you the commands that it has. So these are the default commands that Lando provides. So Lando Composer, Lando DB import, DB export. These are provided by Lando by default for every Lando application. Okay. So let's move on. I hope everyone is clear on these things. This is the very first step. So now let's try to understand what all things we have seen so far. So we have seen name, recipe, and config. So name is, there's nothing special. It's a unique identifier, unique name. So all your containers will start with this name. Your URL will be created on the basis of this name. So this is a unique identifier to find your application. So no two application at the same time can have the same name because it's unique to one application. Then we have recipe. So recipe, it's a combination of services, tooling. So in recipe, we have used Drupal-9. So when we say Drupal-9, it will get everything that is related to Drupal-9. For example, Composer, PHP, then the app server, the MySQL database server. So it all comes inside the recipe. The next we have config. So config is the additional configuration that you need for your recipe. Okay, so the recipe might have some different web root. So I can configure my web root inside config. So I can also specify a different PHP version that I need inside config. So config is customizing your recipe, the things that you have in your recipe. Then you have proxy. So proxy is the domain names that you need. For example, when we create our first app, okay, Lando setup, it says Lando setup.lando.site. So this is a domain name that comes out. So if you want a different domain name, you can configure it using proxy. Then we have services. So these are like Docker containers, but with the predefined steps. So you just have to say, okay, I need the container, Solr container. So you don't have to specify which image, from where, what will the configuration. So these are some predefined services that you can use. Tooling is now you can create your custom commands as well in Lando. Let's say I want to do a DB import, then I need to run a drush updb, then I need to run a drush cex or cim, right? I can just add everything and I can automate into one command. So whenever I need this, I can just run Lando and the command name, and it will execute all the steps. So that will help in automation, in testing, and in many places. And the last one we have here is events. So as in Drupal, we have different events, right? We subscribe to events. Okay, it's like, tell me when these things happen, I will do something of my own. Okay, so let's take an example. Let's say once the database import is complete, clear the cache or do updb. So I can subscribe to that event. Okay, post DB import, and then I can do whatever I want after this. So I have subscribed to the post DB import event. And if you want to see more about the Drupal or any other recipes, you can see there's a GitHub link at the end. So github.com, Lando, Drupal tree, and there are the recipes. You can get into more detail by going into the recipe, the configuration. Everything is provided there in detail around recipe. So what's the default version, default service that gets in when you say recipe as Drupal-9. Okay, moving forward. So we'll have our second demo. So it will be around what we have discussed so far. So you'll again see the lando.yml file. So now we have some new things in config, right? Web root was there, then we have PHP, database, composer, and Rush. So now we have some specified some different versions that we need in our application. So we can add those things in the config and do a Lando start or a Lando rebuild. So what it will do is it will take the Drupal-line recipe and will customize it as per our configuration. So it will give us PHP 8.1, MySQL 5.7, and the composer is 2.3.5. So as you can see here, right, composer version is 2.3.5 that is installed. Okay, so I have my service running. I will do a Lando info and will verify if everything that we have set is there or not. So first we say is like PHP. We have PHP and we have PHP version of 8.1. Then we have MySQL and the version is 5.7. So whatever config defined in the config, you can see it here. Now you can also see what are the running containers using Docker PS. So it will list down all the containers that are currently running. So these two containers, so we have database and app server containers running. Okay. So at times you will see you are working on Lando and it's not responding, or you're not seeing your site, or you're getting some other errors. Then you can do a Docker PS and see if your container is running or not, or if it has stopped. Then you need to run it or start it again. Okay. Let's move on. So this is what we have seen, right? We have seen name, we have seen recipe, and we have seen config. So inside config, we have seen web root, PHP, the database, composer version, the Drush version. Okay. Moving forward to the next concept. Now there's a concept called excludes. So at times you see when you start your Lando start or Lando rebuild, it takes a lot of time, right? Why it takes a lot of time is because when you do a Lando start or Lando rebuild, now it's syncing your files or libraries on your local system and also on the server at the same time. So for example, vendor directory, when you do a Lando composer install, you are installing libraries, your dependencies into vendor directory. That was something you see on your local, and that will also get synced in your web server, Apache or Nginx. So there is additional time it takes. So what you can do is you can exclude. It will say excludes vendor. So whenever you do composer, Lando composer install, it will download the dependencies, but directly in your web server and not on your local. So there are most times that we don't look into this vendor. So instead we can do this, we can exclude this vendor. So it will be present, but it will not be present for you directly inside your project directory. So that will boost the process of starting and syncing. Then we have some more PHP configuration. So let's say you want something different for in your PHP configuration, in your php.ini. So you can also define another config inside of config and then the PHP colon, and you can give your custom php.ini file. So sometimes you need a different memory setup, or you need more memory, more execution time or less execution time to match with your production environment. So you can customize it here. And similarly, we can use xdebug. We can turn it off, and then we can specify Rush, and we can change the default web server that we're running. So we can use via colon, and then Apache is the default. You can use Nginx if you want here using via. The next item is proxy. So proxy is like a nice URL that you need for your web application. So instead of localhost : and some random port number that you see, right? You need a proper nice URLs that you can use for your different services. So you don't want to access using localhost and then the port number. You can define your proxy with a name, but it should have an extension of .lando.site. For example, you are setting up your app server. You can use whatever name you want and then .lando.site. If you want some mailing server, you can specify it like my site mail and then .lando.site. So it's accessible to you directly. And if you want something different from .lando.site, let's say you want your live site URL, www.abc.com, right? Then you need to add it in your host file. That is a manual process that you need to do, or you can automate it as well, but it won't be supported by default. If you don't want to do additional configuration, you should have .lando.site as the pattern at the end, as you can see here. So this what proxy is about. Okay, then we can look into the demo of what we've seen so far. So we have seen excludes, we have seen config, and we have seen proxy. So as you can see, we have the same recipe. Now we have added a new thing called excludes and vendor. Vendor is something we are excluding, and then we have the config that we used previously, and we have added a new thing as proxy, and we are adding proxy to the app server. And I'm giving a name is Specbee demo site.lando.site. Now, whenever I start my application, I will see this as the URL where I can access my application. So as you can see, right, the URLs it's generating. So first is localhost and second is Specbee demo site.lando.site. So by default, if I don't provide this proxy, then it will take the name from the .lando.yml file. So lando setup.lando.site would have been the URL for my app server. Now, looking back, let's see. So now the vendor is empty, as you can see on my system. So I will do a Lando composer install. Now I will have all my dependencies, but my vendor folder will still be empty. If I do my ls-al inside the vendor, I will not see anything. But when I go to the container, the app server container, and there I will see the vendor directory, I will see all the dependencies, all the files that is inside the vendor. So you can go inside any of the servers using this command as docker exec-it, and then the app server name and bin bash. Then you can do cd to the vendor, and then here you will see all the dependencies. So dependencies exist, but it exists only inside the server and not on your machine or the host machine. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So now going back to services, right? So we have seen different services in different projects. So we have Elasticsearch, we have Solr, we have mail services, then we have node packages, node services for building front end, npm packages, gulp. Then we have PhpMyAdmin, we have Redis, Memcached, Varnish. So these are all the different services that we need and we can use in our Lando file. And it's pre-configured services, so you don't have to create a custom service to use this. You can specify this in your services and you can use it. So how will you use it? So you have to start with services : and then you have to define. You have to give it a name. So name, and then you can define the type. So first is the mailing service that I'm using, Mailhog, then type is Mailhog. Then from where it should come from. So I will give the hog from as the app server. Then similarly, you can configure your Memcached, your Solr, and all the services that you need. So that is about services. Now, inside services, you also have build steps. Now, what is build steps? So build steps, like there are 4 major steps when you build a service or a container or anything. So there are things you need to run before that service boots up or after that service boots up, right? Let's say you want to install few of the packages before a service is ready or after a service is ready, right? You can define it using these keys. So we have built, so it will run as you are running that code or application, then build as root. So it will perform things as root is installing that package or dependency. Run and run as root is something that runs after your service boots up. Okay. So here is an example of, let's say in the app server, we need to build something as root. So we need to install a few of the libraries, Memcached and everything before, right? And as a root. So I will define the type as app server, I will build as root. And then I am also defining run. So run is something that will run after my service is ready. So what it says is like, okay, after you get all these packages and services ready, run composer install to get all my dependencies. So this is an automate process. So you don't have to do it manually. You don't have to run the composer install manually after your setup or after you install the libraries and everything. So this is how you can automate few of the things, few of the tasks that you have. So let's see how it works in a demo. So we'll again see the lando.yml file. So we'll see something new as services. Then on the app server, we are running composer install. So what I'm seeing is when my app server is ready, run composer install. So I don't have to manually do it after my container is up and ready. So since my container was already running, I will do a Lando rebuild instead of Lando start. So since we have excluded the vendor file, you are seeing this turbo mode. Lando has detected that you wish to exclude certain directories from the sync. So that's why it rebuilds pretty soon. Okay, and here you see like it's running composer install, installing dependencies from log file. So I just did a rebuild and it did all the process, and at the end it did composer install. So this is the way you can automate things. You can build or get few certain packages. Okay. So we have seen how build step works and how you can do different things at different times before and after services is loaded. Now we're talking about services. So let's talk about the first service that we have called Mailhog. Now, at times, certain developers complain, okay, they don't have the email setup on their local, so they cannot test. They can only test on the dev server or the live server because email is not working or not set up for their local system. So what you can do is you can initiate this service called Mailhog. Okay. In the services, you will define Mailhog and you will give it the type as Mailhog and then port forward. And then you will tell where to hog from. And at the end, you will also define a proxy. So you're giving it a URL. So mail.land.site where you can access this service independently. Right? It will give you direct access to this service. Right. So this is how once you set this up, you can test your mails on your local system. So when you go to this mail.land.site, right, it will look something like this. So it will show, it will give you an inbox and it will show you as connected since the application is connected, and it will give you options like delete all messages and all. So here you can track if your mails are going through, in what format, what all things have been passed through when you mail something. Yeah. Okay, so let's see this demo. So we'll start with the lando.yml file. So you can see, right, inside of services, we have Mailhog now. So the type is Mailhog, the port forward is true, and then I'm saying where to hog from. So I will do a Lando rebuild since I'm adding new things to my existing file. So it will again run compose install because that's already defined once the service is up and running. Okay. So here you're seeing inside of services, you're seeing a new services Mailhog and some new URLs where you can access this new mailbox that you have. Now I will go to this Drupal site, the Drupal URL, and I will set up my Drupal instance now, and we'll test this mail. So I will choose the default settings, the standard template. And now it's asking for me from Drupal database username, password, and the host name. So I can get all these details from Lando info, where we have seen all the credentials and all the data. So you can see the host name is database, and then I have credentials for my database. So I will use these settings to set up. It will take a couple of minutes to finish, but this will give you a complete idea of how this works. So you'll also open this new service that we have created. So this will give us an inbox. As you can see here, right, it says refresh connected inbox. So this is a fresh Drupal instance. There's no contrib modules that we're using separately for any configuration. So as you can see, the site is up. Now I will verify the email address and like see if it's been set up. So I'll go to config and then basic site settings. I just need to be sure that there is a mail present in the email address field. And then since there are no other web form, we'll go to the contact form and we'll try to submit some from here. So this is the subject. So it says your message has been sent. And now we'll go to the inbox and check. So as you can see, there's a new mail here. And I can see the message like this is the mail body. And when I go to the next tab is source, I will see some more details around it. So the encoding and different things that we might need. So the subject and who has sent this and the message. So this will help you to debug anything related to mails. And then you also get an option. If you want to forward this to any using any SMTP, you can forward this from here. So it says to release this message, select an SMTP server. Okay, let's move on to the next service. So next service that we usually use in our Drupal application is Solr. So we use Solr for search API, right? And here are the configurations. So you will create services, then you will say Solr and you will say all these details is type Solr and the core that you want to create. So you can give core any name that you need. Then you can give the port forward as this is the default port which Solr use 8983. Then you can define the config directory. So where is the config set and where it should pick. So in our case, since you're using search API, Solr module will give that path, but you can define your own path and you can have all those files placed there. Okay, so let's look at this demo now. So this is like an in-depth session. Like I don't want to give you a high level of things. Okay, this can be done, this can be done, but more of how it can be done. So you can see right here, we have services and inside the services, we have Solr, then type, core, port forward, and the config. Now we'll again do a Lando rebuild to get this new service. If you want, you can also add the proxy for this new service so you can access it using UI. And even if you don't, it will provide a localhost : the port number URL instead of clean URL. So whenever you're adding some new services, certainly take some time to get that service and then initiate that and create a container out of it. So as you can see, we have a new tab called Solr URLs and the localhost 8983 is the URL here. Now I can go to this URL. So I can see the core and I will get the Solr access, Solr UI. Now I will go to my site and I will configure the search API. to use this. So I will add the server and I will add the details here. And I will show you this as like connected. Since the site doesn't has any data, it's a new site, so it will show you as enabled. So we use the Solr as Solr, and then we'll give the code name. So the core was my code. So again, you can check all this information in the Lando info. So you will see what's the code name, the type, and the port. So here the status says it's enabled. So this is connected, and then you can create the index and you can index your data. So moving ahead. So we have seen the Solr demo. Now let's move ahead to PhpMyAdmin. So PhpMyAdmin is a service, so you can visualize your database. So at times it's difficult to see the tables, the data it has, and like to debug these things, right? So we also have a service for this that's pre-configured. We just have to add services, then PhpMyAdmin, the type will be PhpMyAdmin, and the host. The host you have to define the database host name. So let's say if there are multiple databases, right? So you need to specify all those databases you need PhpMyAdmin for. And then you can define the proxy. So where you can access this PhpMyAdmin console. So this is how this will look once the service is up and running. And there you can access all the tables, all the structures, and the content. So let's move on to its demo. We'll again first look at the lando.yml file. So we have a new service called PhpMyAdmin here. The type and the host is database. And we'll create a proxy to access this. And we'll do a Lando rebuild. So as you can see, it's downloading a PhpMyAdmin here. So at times you can get, so you're seeing, right, pulling Solr and then it's getting an error here. So these are not the ideal cases. Like whenever you do, you might get some error for any of the containers. So you need to start it again, because eventually it will fail after the PhpMyAdmin is downloaded and set up, because one of the other containers, the Solr container, is failed. So when you get any kind of such error, like you don't have to hesitate, you can just start it again. Okay, since the Solr was failed, so this has failed. It's giving us an error. So we can just rebuild it again. Since you already have downloaded the PhpMyAdmin, so it will be quick this time. So this one is just pinging the service again to see if the service is ready or not. Okay. So now you can see a PhpMyAdmin URL here and a default localhost URL. So you can go to this URL and you can access. So I can access my Drupal 9 database through PhpMyAdmin now. You don't have to connect or do anything else here. Since you have added the host name as database, the host name of your DB, it gets connected. Okay, let's move on. So the next is Memcached. So we have seen sites using Memcached. So you can just define the services cache and the type is Memcached. And then you can update your settings.php to have these details as the port numbers, the host name, and the default configuration. So it should use cache backend Memcached as your cache bins and the default cache bin. So these are your settings.php configuration that you need in order to run this Memcached on your local. Then similarly, we have a varnish. So you can configure this as well. So you can use the type as varnish and define the backend, the port number, and if you want SSL on it or not. Then similarly, we can have a node. So let's say you're using node on your theme, right? And you want this to be built automatically once you start the service. So you can define this. So you see, you're saying type as node and then override, and you're defining where are my themes and which command to run after this node server is ready. So it's saying npm install and npm run build all. So you can define your commands according to your theme, however you're compiling and using it. So this will automate that process. And the next concept that we have is events. So like we talked, right, we can subscribe to any events. It's like any other Drupal event. For example, user is logging in Drupal, right? So that is an event. Or someone logs out, or someone deletes something, or edits something. So everything, anything that is being done is an event, right, in Drupal. So similarly, we also have some pre and post events, so that you can subscribe to and you can add what all things you need to run during that time. So one of the example here is like post DB import. So it's a post event. So after DB import, it should run drush CIM and drush UPDB, right? So you also have like pre-events, post-events, and how can you find different events that you need? So let's say I want to find every event that is on Lando start. So what I will do is I will type this command Lando start, and I will verbose it, and it will grep emitting. So whatever is emitting there, you can use that as an event in your pre and post. Similarly, if you want in your service, right? Let's say you're starting some other service or using some tooling. You can just do the Lando, the command, and the verbose, and you can grab emitting. So you'll get the event that you can subscribe to. Okay. So let's see a demo on how this works. So this will be the last demo for the day. So I think we're pretty close to time as well. So as you can see here, events, we have post DB, and I'm just echoing that import completed and get ready to code. So once I import the DB, this will get executed. So I'm doing Lando DB import, and I'm giving the DB name. So Lando DB import is a default command which Lando provides. So it says the import complete, and it's executing the code that I've given. Post, the database is imported. After the import is finished, only then it will execute. Okay, so the last concept that we have is tooling. So tooling is like different commands that you can create. You can give your own names, and you can define different steps that it will do in that command. So that is tooling. So DB import, DB export are the different toolings that Lando provides by default. So these are the examples of the default Lando tooling, which it provides. You can also create a custom tooling. So you can create tooling. Let's say you want a drupal-check, right? So you can just do Lando and drupal-check as your command. And whenever you execute this, so on the app server, it will execute this command. As you can see, it's app Drupal vendor, and it will do a drupal-check. So you can define your own commands, and you can define which on which service it should run on. It should run on Node or app server or MySQL. Right? So in this way, you can create your own custom tools that you need throughout. For example, another example can be or for your xdebug. So for your debugging, if you want to put that on and off, since like debugging is a process that takes a lot of resources, so you have the ability to turn it on and off using your custom tooling. So here you can see we have created two commands. One is for xdebug-on, and the other is for xdebug-off. And it's doing certain steps and executing certain commands as a root on app server. So you can have a linting command for CSS linting, JS linting, Drupal following the Drupal standards, and all those commands. You can create them using tooling. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this session. So what's next from here, right? So now you have the understanding of the basic concepts. You can create your own Lando file. You can configure your local setup. Now, what more to learn from here, right? So you can learn to create custom services. So as of now, we are only using services. You can learn how to create your custom services. You can learn to create and update custom recipes. So as of now, we are seeing only predefined recipes of Drupal 8, 9, LAMP stack, or different applications that it supports. So you can learn to create your own custom recipes. Then you can learn to override Docker images. For example, for PHP, you want a certain image to be used. So how can you customize and use your image instead of the default? And then how you can integrate Lando with different configurations or different web servers and CI/CD. And to learn to automate testing. So these are the next steps you can look forward to from here. So once you're good with the core concepts, these are the things that you can go forward and learn and try to upgrade yourself in terms of Lando, its functioning, and you can have all your containers, all your services that you need on your project or in your local system. You can configure that. So yeah, that's it from me. So do you have any questions?
Hi guys, thank you for watching. I had an amazing time learning all the new things here at Specbee's TechX. And if you did too, do let us know in the comments below. Keep following Specbee for the latest trends in technology. See you in the next one.